The massive 18-wheeler lurched forward, its brakes screaming in protest as Frank Thompson fought desperately for control. The steep mountain road ahead vanished into darkness, illuminated only by his failing headlights as they cut through the dense fog. His knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as the truck picked up speed, too much speed. "God help me," Frank whispered, his voice trembling. "The brakes are going." The weight of 80,000 pounds of steel and cargo pushed him down the treacherous decline, a deadly force of nature he could no longer contain. Ahead, the road curved sharply around the mountainside, with nothing but a 1,000-foot drop waiting for those who missed the turn. "Mayday! Mayday! Runaway truck on Devil's Backbone Pass. Clear the road." Frank's desperate call echoed into the night, met only with static. He was completely alone, speeding toward what seemed like certain death on one of America's most notorious trucking routes. What happened in those next crucial minutes would defy all odds and become one of the most incredible survival stories in trucking history. Hey folks, welcome back to Highway Horror, Truck Stories, where we bring you the most intense, heart-stopping tales from the open road. If this is your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any of our weekly stories from the asphalt wilderness. Today's story is one that will have you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. A veteran trucker, a deadly mountain pass, failing brakes, and the fight for survival that unfolded one stormy night. This isn't Hollywood, this is real life. Let me take you back to October 14, 2019. Frank Thompson was making a routine haul through the Rocky Mountains, a route he'd driven dozens of times before. With 20 years of experience under his belt, Frank was considered one of the best in the business, known for his calm demeanor and methodical approach to difficult routes. The weather report had mentioned light rain, nothing unusual for the season. What it hadn't predicted was the severe storm system that rolled in as Frank began his ascent up Devil's Backbone Pass, a treacherous 18-mile stretch with an average grade of 7% and more than 20 hairpin turns. By the time Frank reached the summit, visibility had dropped to less than 30 feet, and the temperature had plummeted, causing patches of black ice to form on the road. Still, with his experience, Frank maintained his composure. He'd seen worse conditions and lived to tell the tale. "I remember thinking that I just needed to take it slow and steady," Frank later recalled in an interview. "Just another day on the job." But as he began his descent, that's when everything changed. The first sign of trouble came with a subtle change in the truck's handling. Frank tapped the brakes to slow his descent, and immediately noticed they didn't respond with their usual bite. His heart skipped a beat as he pumped them again, harder this time. The truck barely slowed. "I've driven for 20 years and you developed this sixth sense," Frank would later explain. "I knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong with the braking system." The dashboard warning lights confirmed his fears as they lit up like a Christmas tree. Brake pressure dropping rapidly. System failure imminent. Frank's mind raced through his options, each one grimmer than the last. Keep watching to discover the split-second decision Frank made that would determine whether he lived or died on that mountain. At 65 miles per hour and accelerating, Frank's options were disappearing as quickly as the road beneath his wheels. Devil's Backbone Pass was notorious among truckers for its lack of runaway ramps, those uphill sand or gravel paths designed to safely stop out-of-control vehicles. Frank reached for the CB radio again. "Mayday! Any units on Devil's Backbone? I've got a fully loaded rig with no brakes heading down. Is there anyone ahead of me?" The static crackled before a voice responded. "Thompson? That you? This is Martinez about 3 miles down. I've got a family in a minivan about a mile ahead of me. How fast are you going?" "Too fast," Frank replied, his voice eerily calm despite the circumstances. "And picking up speed. Tell them to pull over if they can." The speedometer now read 72 miles per hour as Frank battled with the steering wheel. Each curve required perfect timing and precision. One miscalculation, one wheel off the edge, and he'd plummet to certain death, potentially taking innocent lives with him if he crashed into other vehicles. Frank had one desperate card left to play. He'd heard stories of truckers in similar situations using the guardrails to scrape along and gradually reduce speed. It was a dangerous gamble that often resulted in the truck flipping over, but with lives at stake including his own, Frank made his choice. He angled the massive truck toward the right guardrail, feeling the violent shudder as metal met metal, sending sparks flying into the night. The truck lurched and threatened to jackknife, but Frank countersteered with all his might. The noise was deafening, Frank recalled, like being inside a giant can while someone beat it with a sledgehammer. The speed dropped to 65, then 60. But the guardrail was giving way under the enormous pressure. Frank could see through his side mirror that nearly 100 feet of barrier had been torn away, leaving nothing between him and the abyss. The next curve was approaching fast, too fast, and this one had no guardrail at all. Frank had seconds to make a decision that would determine whether he lived or died. With the curve approaching and his speed still dangerously high, he spotted a narrow service road branching off to the left, a maintenance access path that climbed steeply uphill. What happened next defied all logic and showcased why experienced truckers are some of the most skilled drivers on Earth. Without hesitation, Frank yanked the wheel left, forcing the massive truck onto the narrow path. The sudden change in direction and the uphill grade created resistance that began to slow the runaway vehicle. Gravel sprayed everywhere as the tires fought for traction on the unpaved surface. "I was running purely on instinct at that point," Frank said. "I knew if I stayed on the main road, there was a sharp turn coming with a 1,000-foot drop and no guardrail. At least the service road gave me a fighting chance." But the service road presented its own dangers. It was barely wide enough for the truck, with a steep embankment on one side and a drop-off on the other. As the truck slowed, Frank realized he was headed straight for a maintenance shed at the end of the path. Frank desperately downshifted, the transmission screaming in protest. He turned the wheel hard to the left, causing the trailer to skid. The maneuver worked partially. The cab missed the shed, but the trailer clipped the corner of the building. The impact sent the trailer swinging violently to the right, threatening to pull the entire rig over the edge. For a terrifying moment, Frank felt the right wheels of his cab lift off the ground as the truck balanced on two wheels. Time slowed down, Frank remembered. "I could see the valley below through my passenger window. I thought, this is it. I'm going over." Through some miracle of physics, or perhaps sheer determination, the truck crashed back down onto all its wheels, rocking violently but remaining upright. The momentum had been broken. After sliding another 30 feet, the rig finally shuddered to a complete stop, mere inches from the edge. Frank sat in stunned silence, his hands still gripping the wheel so tightly that his fingers had gone numb. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. But his ordeal wasn't over yet. As the adrenaline began to subside, Frank became aware of a new danger. The sharp smell of diesel filled the cab. Looking in his side mirror, he could see fuel leaking from a ruptured tank, cooling beneath the hot engine. If you think this situation couldn't get any more dangerous, stay with me. What happened next pushed Frank's survival skills to the absolute limit. With the threat of fire now imminent, Frank knew he had only moments to act. He grabbed his emergency kit and practically fell out of the cab door, his legs shaking so badly he could barely stand. The mountain air hit him like a slap to the face as he stumbled away from the truck. The fog had thickened, and he could barely make out the outline of his rig. Rain mixed with sleet pelted his face as he put distance between himself and the potential fireball. "I made it about 50 yards before my legs gave out," Frank recounted. "I collapsed on the gravel and looked back, expecting at any moment to see the whole thing go up in flames. Instead of an explosion, Frank watched as his truck sat precariously balanced, fuel still dripping slowly onto the ground. The danger was far from over, but for now the immediate threat of fire hadn't materialized. But here's where this incredible story takes another dramatic turn that no one could have anticipated. As Frank reached for his cell phone to call for help, he heard something that made his blood run cold, the sound of a car engine laboring up the service road. Headlights pierced the fog, moving slowly toward his disabled rig. "Stop! Stop!" Frank shouted, waving his arms frantically as he ran toward the approaching vehicle. "Fuel leak. Turn around." The car, a small SUV, came to a halt about 20 yards from Frank. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out, clutching a first aid kit. "I'm a nurse," she called out. "I saw the guardrail damage on the main road and followed the debris trail. Are you hurt?" Her name was Rebecca Winters, an ER nurse who had been driving home after finishing her shift at a hospital in the valley below. Instead of calling emergency services and waiting in her car as most would have done, Rebecca had made the decision to investigate and offer help. "That woman had more courage than anyone I've ever met," Frank said. "She knew there was a damaged truck up there that could explode at any moment, and she drove toward it anyway." Rebecca quickly assessed Frank for injuries while calling 911 on her phone. Finding no serious wounds beyond some cuts and bruises, she helped him to her vehicle and drove a safe distance away from the leaking truck. "I'm just doing what anyone would do," Rebecca told Frank, though they both knew that wasn't true. Few would have shown such bravery. As they waited for emergency services, Frank learned that Rebecca had lost her brother, also a trucker, in an accident 5 years earlier. Since then, she had made it her personal mission to stop whenever she saw signs of trouble on the road. "I couldn't save my brother," she explained, "but maybe I can help someone else's." The significance of her actions wasn't lost on Frank. Had he been unconscious or more seriously injured, Rebecca's decision to investigate could have been the difference between life and death. The wait for emergency services seemed endless as Frank and Rebecca sat in her car, watching the truck through the fog and rain. Every few minutes, Rebecca checked Frank's vitals, concerned about shock and delayed injuries. "Talk to me," she insisted when Frank grew quiet. "Tell me about your family." Frank spoke of his wife of 25 years, his 2 grown children, and his 3-year-old granddaughter who called him Papa Truck. As he talked, tears welled in his eyes at the realization of how close he'd come to never seeing them again. "I've been driving trucks since I was 22, Frank told Rebecca. "Never had so much as a fender bender. And tonight, I nearly became a statistic." The lessons from Frank's near-death experience would go on to save countless lives and change industry standards. This is why his story matters to every driver on the road. When emergency services finally arrived, they secured the area and contained the fuel leak. The investigation that followed revealed the cause of the brake failure, a manufacturing defect in a critical brake component that had gone undetected despite regular maintenance checks. The company that produced the part issued a nationwide recall following Frank's incident, potentially preventing dozens of similar catastrophes. Frank's quick thinking and skilled driving became a case study in trucking safety courses across the country. But the story doesn't end there. Frank Thompson never drove a truck again after that night. The trauma of the experience left him with severe PTSD that made it impossible for him to get behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. Instead, he found a new calling. Today, Frank runs one of the country's most respected trucking safety consultation firms. He travels to trucking companies and conventions, sharing his story and teaching defensive driving techniques specifically designed for emergency situations. "I lost my career that night," Frank says, "but I found my purpose." As for Rebecca Winters, the nurse who stopped to help, she and Frank have remained close friends. Every year on the anniversary of the accident, they meet for dinner and remember how their lives intersected on that foggy mountain road. "There are 3 types of heroes in this world," Frank often says during his safety lectures. "Those who run into burning buildings, those who put their lives on the line in uniform, and those ordinary people who see someone in trouble and simply decide to help." Rebecca is that third kind, and sometimes they're the most important of all. Frank's story reminds us that on the open road, we are all vulnerable, yet we are also all connected. The split-second decisions we make, whether we're professional truck drivers or everyday motorists, can have profound consequences. "When I'm asked if I believe in miracles," Frank concludes in his talks, "I tell people to look at the facts. A catastrophic brake failure on one of America's most dangerous mountain passes. No runaway ramp. Bad weather. And somehow I walked away. You tell me what to call that." If you've enjoyed this incredible survival story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Highway Horror, Truck Stories. Share this video with someone who appreciates the skill and bravery of the men and women who keep our economy moving on 18 wheels. And remember, next time you're on the highway and see a truck, give them space and respect. Because every trucker has a story and every journey home is a victory. This is Highway Horror, Truck Stories. Drive safe out there and we'll see you on the next haul.